And good evening, everybody. If it's Tuesday night, it's Divided We Stand, and tonight we have a special Divided We Stand. I'm Brian Weinstein. I want to say hello to all of our friends and viewers on Periscope, YouTube, Facebook, and VK, especially some of our Russian fans. Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья, зрители канала. Anyway, tonight we do have a special guest, a very special guest. It's Sandy Schoelles, who's going to basically moderate a debate for us. And in addition to Sandy, we have our David Price, who's a regular on Divided We Stand. We have Paul Maginley, my longtime friend from Toledo, Ohio, part of the Reality Report, and Antonio Reid out of North Carolina. Correct, Antonio? If we got it right? That's right. Antonio's been on our show quite a few times. So without any further ado, I am going to take it to Sandy.
Well, good evening. I'm Sandy Schoelles.
So I'm happy to be with this
man. That Dave and Brian do an excellent job every week in their political discourse.
And it's very.
And of course, Antonio Reid is part of Environmental Coffee House and has a platform, and he has a show called The Rising Tide when everybody can sing together and
time.
My internet might be a little sketchy, so just listen
If I'm not.
I live out in the boonies, and we have a lot of limitations. No broadband in this part of
This.
Paul, I've been with Paul before on shows, and so this is a good group. So
Tonight, since we're all very opinionated, but we're also all very educated, I am not going to impart my pearls of wisdom tonight. I am going to listen to the pearls of wisdom of the four brilliant minds that are with me. Antonio and Paul, they kind of represent a less traditional progressive viewpoint when it comes to what's going on in the country, politically for the president. Brian and Dave may have a bit more of the Democratic Party view, but we'll hear how it goes. It's kind of a debate, though, because if there are dissections in opinions or dissensions in opinions, well, we'll be dissecting opinions for sure. Dissensions in opinions, we'll find out tonight. And believe me, they're all educated. So, guys, I think what we're going to do is the basic thing I'm going to do is just time keep. So there's an even amount of time for everybody to state a position, and we could start with Antonio and Paul, who, if you guys want to have a conversation, a presentation of your thoughts, I'd say let's start with Antonio, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sandy, and thank everybody for being here, our audience and our other panelists. I think this topic is so very important. What to do, where is your vote best placed, and what are the long-term, what are the short-term, intermediate, and long-term implications of our political engagement, voting and other participatory democratic processes that individuals can engage in. Right now, we're headed into the 2020 election, and Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee on the Democratic side, and of course Donald Trump is the incumbent president, the candidate running to keep his seat in the White House. And so the question's been asked, if you're a progressive, if you're somebody who values things like care for all, you value things like responding to the increasing existential threat of climate change, if you're concerned about police brutality, if you're concerned about education, access to education, if you're concerned about lifting people up and out of poverty and actually getting to that great society, what should you do now? And my point of view on this is that this system, political system we've created, where the Democrats and the Republicans have dominated the political landscape, It's simply not possible under this political vehicle to get to the destination we want to get at. And in fact, every 4 years, regardless of who you vote for, we end up actually getting further away.
Further away. Can you just flesh that out just a little bit more before we go on to Paul?
We lost sound.
Oh, we lost sound.
I still see we have our meters going as far as sound.
Audible?
Oh, now you're audible.
Okay.
Something in the air.
Don't forget, we have 5 people draining, so it's a little bit tough here.
Oh, it would have been worse if you were on mine. Trust me.
The point that I'll make and finish up here, as far as getting worse and getting further away from those political objectives, is understanding that we've not just been in this political battle, since 2008, but there's actually a history behind this. We didn't start this in 1980. We have been fighting for, as progressives, universal health care, single payer, since the end of the Second World War. So if you take that perspective, you'll see that at one time we were actually moving closer under the New Deal era presidents to the idea of universal health care. That's how we got Medicare. That's how we got Medicaid. But today we have Joe Biden, who is still on the record saying that he's going to veto a Medicare for All bill, regardless if it passes the House and the Senate. So that should tell you it's no better off having a Republican. And this is a man who says not only is he going to immediately veto a Medicare for All bill, he's going to go out, he's going to take Paul Ryan's approach and go after Medicare and go after Medicaid. And him being a Democrat, and let me finish this really quickly, him being a Democrat enables him to do that, because the people on the left who are kind of the vanguards that protect Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, essentially they're turned off. Their power is deactivated in times of Democratic presidencies. And so you can have Bill Clinton-esque figures. You can have Obama-like figures. You can have Biden-like figures really substantially cut these programs in ways that Republicans really can't.
Okay, well, I think that was a pretty good opening statement, and just well, certainly it's food for further conversation. And Paul, I'm going to go next to you to expound on what Antonio has said and give us some of your own educated thoughts in this.
Well, thanks, Andy. Yeah, Antonio and I didn't get a chance to talk prior to the show, but interestingly, we have arrived at similar conclusions independently. Now, Trump has been a disaster for this country. Trump and his Republican Party, they've worked together to increase the budget deficit to outrageous levels, increase military spending. But they did this in conjunction with the Democrats, I must say. Now, it seems to me that Trump has been losing his Republican allies lately. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen should he get back into power, whether he's got any allies left. Now, of course, power attracts people. But so now we're faced with what I consider a very weak opponent in Joe Biden. Not only is he personally rather, I don't want to use the word despicable. That's a bit rough, but certainly he's creepy. Okay, he's likely a perpetrator of sexual harassment. We've seen how he treats young ladies. As far as record goes, he does not, I would say, have a sterling record of liberality. Now, piggybacking on something that a couple things, I follow history quite closely, so I'd like to talk a little bit about history. The country has moved rightward in the last since Reagan years. That's both sides. That's Democrat and Republicans. If anything, they've been a similar party in many ways, moving right wing after the New Deal aspect hit a high note with LBJ. Now, it was interesting that the presidents post FDR up to Reagan tended to believe in New Dealism, and this includes Richard Nixon, who passed the OSHA Act, and certainly Eisenhower, who oversaw 95% highest tax break on the wealthy, Truman, so on. Since Reagan, we've had a shift towards cutting, retrenching of all welfare programs. I felt that the Clinton administration was just terrible for liberals, as he approved NAFTA, moved jobs offshore, and then started reforming welfare. Okay, in conjunction with Newt Gingrich and their demands. So we've been moving right wing ever since, and both parties have been playing the same dance. In addition, the big question here really is there's definitely a progressive wing to the Democratic Party, the wing, of course, which I most identify with. Bernie was the outstanding representative, along with Alexandra Cortez. Now, they kind of got shouted down in the sense that Biden overwhelmingly won the nomination over Bernie. Now, the question is, will Biden work with the progressives? Okay, will he work with the BLM protesters? Will he work with protesters in general? Because he certainly doesn't have a sterling record of working with Occupy Wall Street, which occurred in Obama's first term. Okay, they certainly didn't give them any airplay. That's for sure. Now, the historian Roger Zinn stated that the populist movement in the 19th century was a great threat, a great liberal threat to the existing government, and what happened was they tied their wagon behind a political party represented by William Jennings Bryan. And with Bryan's defeat, they went down and the message was diluted. And I think Antonio kind of referred to this obliquely in that, yes, the message does get lost when you tie your wagon to a very moderate or centrist candidate. And I'm going to let it end at that for now.
Okay. Well, some of the things I think that we should think about in light of what you've said is, well, you talked about how we got here, Paul, and I think we should go on now and listen to David and Brian, who you might be surprised in that it may not be what we think they think. So I think let's start with, I'm doing a lot of thinking here. David.
Oh, well, hey, Sandy and everybody out there. Okay, we can end the debate right now. I agree with Tony. I agree.
We're done.
I agree with, the guy on the left there, whoever that is, the guy who's in Ohio or whatever, married to Mrs. Paul. I can't agree with Brian because that would just break everything up.
Stop it, Dave.
I'm going to take a little bit.
Boy.
Remember, I'm only
It's going to be 1 against 5, apparently.
No.
It's going to end up this way, Brian.
Now, all joking aside.
I'm okay.
Busy sharing.
I'm used to it.
Look, here's the thing. I admire progressives. I think the more progressive you can be, the better off you are. And it's a very simple thing. Progressives look ahead. That's what they do. It's what they do. They look at what's here and what doesn't work and move ahead. Unfortunately, politics isn't necessarily that way. So I'm going to lay out, it's overly simplification, but I'm not as smart as most people, so I got to go really kind of slow. In this election, as we do in every election, and please, somebody, if they do an alternate or an add to this, I would. I think there are 5 choices that are in front of everyone. It's our smorgasbord of choices. In no particular order, You can decide not to vote at all, right? You can do that. You can decide to write in a candidate. Mickey Mouse is one of the famous. You can do whatever you want. You can say, I believe, or I want a third-party candidate. We do have them. Unfortunately, we don't have viable third parties, and we should. That's a debate or a discussion for another time. You have the Democrats, and you have the Republicans. And Tony, it would be hard to argue with your proposition that that is. And I think what makes them the same is a word. What Pink Floyd sang about it, and we all know about it, and the OJs sang about it. Supreme Court says it's the same as people, and I love this. I wish I was this wise. Somebody said, I'll believe they're people when they execute them in Texas. You don't execute money, right? So it's money. And people with money do not want change. Why would they? They have the money. They fear the change. Now, every once in a while, we do have a new category. I'm going to talk about new, even with money. Jeff Bezos, and I'm hoping to make him a good friend tonight. Jeff, if you're listening, and the reason I say that, he's actually, his newest building is 3 buildings from mine here in Crystal City. Jeff, just for a shout out, I was writing about him, and this was a month ago, so I'm sure it's dated, makes $191,500 a minute. A minute. So he's kind of almost in the category himself as the world's richest man, and you throw Gates, this is just new technology. Now, let's get back to Mr. Trump. To me, Mr. Trump is not only the most deplorable, despicable, deadly, and dangerous president we've ever had. He is such a bad man that we should not let him even have visited the White House on a tour because he stains everything he touches. Now, you say, but David, let me just take each one of those 5 that I presented really quickly. You can do, people, and honestly, you can do whatever you want. This is, I believe that. Some people say, no, you must do, no, you've got those choices. They're your choices. But not voting is doing 2 things, I think. It's saying, I don't care who wins. And I would make an argument, not that you don't have rights or anything, but I just think that's just, to me, that's just not a viable option. You can make it, but you're not contributing to anything. You're just giving up. Oh, I don't care. That's one option, though. Second option, writing in. To me, that's a very selfish and individual decision. You can do that to show how absurd. It certainly is a mark to say this government is absurd. It doesn't matter who I vote for. So I'm going to vote for Mickey Mouse or whomever. But you're doing that, and you have no chance of winning. But you're saying, okay, I'm going to make this stand. I don't know, and I'd be hard-pressed to say that the ballot box is the place to make that stand. Okay? Let's go with the third parties. I think that's a very viable route to go. I know liberals have disagreed with me. Oh, no, it's not this. No, they have platforms that you can get behind. Right? And that's fine. The only thing you have to remember is your guy or your girl, your man or your woman, your candidate is probably not going to win because there's enough people to win. So if you want to win, you're saying you're saying what you should. I have a moral commitment to this group. If it's an environmental cause and it's environmentalist, if it's whatever it is, libertarian, whatever. But unfortunately, as Paul kind of pointed out historically, and I think we'd all agree, nobody came down and said you will only have 2 parties. If you look around the world, there are very few countries that only have 2 parties. And we could do a whole show on how historically that happened, but basically you can blame a couple people. If you want to, I'd not blame anyone. Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. That's where the division started, and not Hamilton the musical, although it's great. So here's what I want to do. I brought some visuals tonight. I'm getting into this. Okay, I can also eat them if I get bored. Can you see these things? One is an apple, I think, and one is an orange. Now they share a lot in common, right? I think they're fruits. I don't know. Sometimes I get my vegetables and fruits mixed up. But tonight, if they're not, humor me and say they are. They're round. Notice I even got them almost the same size. That was very hard to steal these from the local grocer, but I did. So, but I'm going to suggest to you that these 2 things, as similar as they are different. Paul, you might like apple better than you like orange, right? You might. Antonio, you might like orange better than you do. That's part of it. Now, nutritionally, you could now you can say nutritionally, which is better for you. But this was the thing that's supposed to, they both prevent scurvy. Haven't seen scurvy recently, right? Now you said, Dave, you're getting weird again. Well, that's where I live. But here's the thing. I think that there are substantial differences between Joe Biden, the person, and Donald Trump, the person. Now, again, let me caution. I'm not saying you vote for the person, but I'm going to go with you, Tony, on this one. Certainly, the Democratic Party, and again, we can make up our. I don't like people saying they're a Democrat or a Republican. And why do that? Says you follow a party. I don't think you should do that. And we see that a lot. The Republicans, if any Republicans are listening tonight who thought they were Republicans and followed Donald Trump, it ain't going to happen. And I will return because I want to finish. When I get mine next time, I think I've not dismissed, and I'll certainly feed off yours. I don't want to talk, necessarily about the three. Yes, they're fine. They're fine choices, but you're not going to have a president out of them. Go ahead. I'm done.
You sure?
Unless Brian's going to speak, and then I don't want to hear him speak.
Okay. All right, Sandy. I'll only take a few minutes for this. I thought about what folks were probably going to say before they came on. And generally, I thought, well, we know that Paul and Antonio definitely don't like Trump. David and I don't like Trump. David and I are not big fans of Joe Biden. Paul and Antonio are not big fans of Joe Biden.
So
but when it comes down to that final decision, why is it that somebody stands over here and somebody stands over there? And again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now. But I think what it comes down to is pragmatism and idealism. And that's probably where we're going to go tonight. Because Paul and Antonio have talked about history. And it's funny because I think about history too. We could talk about how left-wing candidates have done in this country. And Paul mentioned us moving to the right as a country. And it's funny because while he's saying that, I'm thinking, just the America that I've known, I've never known it anything but trying to be on the right. I feel that we've lost our center. And that's going to be the big problem now. There seems to be no center in this country, and that's a very dangerous position for us to be in. And this will lead into further discussion tonight, at least from my state of tune. But in general, I think it's an interesting situation because we all have the same general opinion about these people, but we've landed at a different place. And I think that in the end, when we're having this friendly debate, and we've done this before, so folks watching understand we're all cool with each other. Okay, these are all peeps, except for Dave. He's got an issue with me.
I don't like Brian.
Right, he admits that. But and he hasn't liked me for 20 years, but he seems to call me up every day, which is kind of the oddest thing about that. Yeah, I mean, for a guy who hates me, he calls me up every day and comes into my classroom every day. But no, again, I think it comes down to idealism versus pragmatism. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I think there's a time for each. And as we proceed through this debate, I hope to suggest that in this case, at this moment, pragmatism is so important because whether it's through climate change or through economic disaster or through a pandemic, we can lose everything, and I mean everything, if we don't land somewhere where we make some movement. Otherwise, we're done. So that's all I want to say at this moment. Uh-oh. I don't hear Sandy. Sandy, do you have your mic on?
Okay, got it.
Now you're on.
Yeah, I forgot I'm not.
That's all right. We do it all the time.
Yeah, all right. Tony. Well, you've got enough time. So, on to the presentation that Dave and Brian gave. Pragmatism. To have our, you all neutral tonight. You all have your cases pretty well stated, but let's get deeper.
Yeah, I think that all the points here that have been made so far are valid. I would only add an overarching thematic context. And I think Brian's right to say that we all generally do have similar perspectives and come to likewise conclusions. The reason why I fall where I do is because I see that the United States, as a cultural, political, economic entity, is engaged in a sort of suicide. And I mean that very deliberately, and I actually mean that very literally. And the Democrat Republican Party are two kind of most direct manifestations of extremely injurious, self-injurious behavior. So to me, when I look at it, and so let's move away from that kind of theoretical approach to what do I mean in terms of pragmatism, since that's been brought up and often is. The best analog for the future is the past. So that's why history is important here. And I look at the sentiments and the feelings and the idealism, actually, that brought Barack Obama to the White House in 2008. And the idea there was, and this was a perfect moment to demonstrate exactly how deranged this political system is, right? President Barack Obama's election in 2008 is the epitome of American derangement, this syndrome that we're going through. Because this was a candidate who the left truly did believe was going to deliver us, if I can use that Christological language, to a single payer, to access to education, to bringing the homeless people in our country into the limelight, being recognized instead of being ignored and being hyper-policed, ending police brutality, ending the foreign wars. That's in large part why Obama got elected, was because the brutality that we were intensifying around the world was so sickening to many of the American people. But in actual fact, we got the whole and opposite of everything we'd hoped for with President Barack Obama. And in fact, it was worse than that. Not only did we not gain any ground, we lost it. President Obama was able to, and his team, more effectively to go into Democratic-held states and destroy the movement to single payer like no Republican ever could do. We saw that Obama took the radicals, or what people were calling radicals on the far left, and completely neutered them by turning the majority of the left, which is a more complacent, more affluent, liberal class. We almost, you see, extremes and radicals need the consent of a certain plurality or majority of people. And Obama was able to effectively turn the liberal class off, the left class off. And so we lost a lot of that public energy that's necessary to create change. And he did that in a way that was much more effective than Republicans do, because when Republicans try their tactic, which they call law and order, their approach is so bombastic, it actually just startles up the left. It makes us more vocal. But Obama was able to cut off our voices. There was no criticism on the mainstream generally about Obama in terms of his drone strikes that we know have killed hundreds of innocent people. And remember, that's ultimately why Martin Luther King would turn against the Democratic Party, is because we saw that the type of brutality that was happening at home was happening abroad in a much more lethal, much more industrial, and much more intense form. And Obama really showed us how to effectively navigate and use the administrative state in such a way that he could take the 2 wars that President Bush, the Republican, started and expand them, according to Leon Panetta, to at least 11 different fighting zones. Okay? This is incredibly significant. And this is all happening while we have a Democrat in power. This is just impossible for a Republican to do. This is just impossible. Why? Because the New York Times, which is an arm, actually a lot of the media, sometimes she's right, there is a liberal bias in the media, and this liberal bias protects a lot of the things that the Democrat Party is able to do that when Republicans try to do them, that it's not able. The last thing I want to say about this is why we can't ultimately go anywhere with this dynamic is because we're ultimately missing it out here. Parties are erected to protect interest. And the interest that's being protected here is based on class dynamics. The Democrat and Republican Party are protecting the upper echelons. And if you look at it, that dynamic, now everybody's scrambling and saying, well, I'm not part of the upper echelons. So how then do I configure my interest with that agenda the Democrat and Republican parties are pursuing? Well, the way that you do that is based off of kind of your cultural identity, what is most visceral to you. And so your response actually is not pragmatic, it's emotional. That Donald Trump is repulsive in a way that it immediately turns people off on the left. But he can literally enact or do the same policies or follow up on the same policies as Obama. And those same people who are turned off by Trump doing them are totally unfazed by the left doing them. And what that does is it allows the systems and structures that have created what Ralph Nader is calling this omnicidal engine that oppresses Black people, deports undocumented immigrants. That was Obama, by the way, deported and treat 2.3 million undocumented immigrants deported under Obama. No Republican, not even Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower during the Second World War could get numbers like that. This is an effective system. And I would argue we are not better off under almost in any situation with a type of Obama compared to Trump. And the point that I would make here that's significant is take, for instance, the climate issue, right? People can say that Trump's so much worse on the climate. In a lot of ways, he is.
That was a piece.
But with Obama, he was able to navigate the Paris Accords in favor of the oil industry while creating the illusion that we were internationally effectively coming together to address the crisis, which would silence us during the most important and crucial times of humanity. Trump, thank God, came to power, acted like a bombastic idiot like Ronald Reagan, ripping solar panels off the White House, throwing up the Paris Accords, and now we can see that we're still in trouble. We're still in trouble, and we still have to mobilize, and that there's no progress been made. We're still at square one. Obama gave us the illusion that we were somewhere we weren't in the first place. An enemy you can't see is an enemy you can't fight.
Can I go?
Oh. No.
We're gonna wait. I got to do this civilly and wait my time.
We're gonna flow to Paul because I can see that Paul has a lot going on behind those glasses.
Actually, I was thinking about dinner. No, great comments made by Antonia, I must say. I think that there's a great fear of Biden also obscuring the real drive for reform by titularly, at least on a titular basis, representing change or liberal a move towards the left. So absolutely spot on, I think. Now, I must correct myself because I said I said it was Roger Zinn. Roger Zinn. Actually, it was Howard Zinn. It was Howard Zinn. That's where I got the
Oh,
information.
you were thinking of Roger Maris and home runs because there's no baseball.
Yeah, I know. Or Roger and me or something. But so I must say that I have not yet decided what to do. I am definitely conflicted. The power that we as Americans have as to vote is viewed as basically the calling card of democracy. And so basically a vote for Biden, in my view, is some kind of prophylaxis vote. That somehow emasculates me as a voter, I think.
Could you use smaller words? I'm struggling.
I'm not, well, you know what prophylaxis means.
Well, I know that I
used it a few times.
And girls wouldn't use them. I know that, but I don't know.
But I'm not so sure that I can do with a prophylactic vote. I need something positive to spend my vote on, not direct my vote towards, not something prophylactic, just as a preventative to prevent Trump from coming back in. Now, of course, Antonio, you're in North Carolina. Both Dave and Brian are going to know all the state dynamics as to which one tends to vote Republican and so on. I'm in a battleground state. I mean, Brian, New Jersey, I don't know. Dave, you're in Washington, D.C. So, but anyway, I guess my vote is important. And
it is.
I want to see what happens. Well, I'm not going to just spend it on prophylaxis, okay? It's got to be something more than that. Biden's got to give me a reason to vote for him. Now, I assume he's going to finally open up his mouth and talk as the election nears. Perhaps they'll debate a few times. If they do, I'm afraid Trump is likely to mop the floor with him, but hopefully not. The big question here is the great light of the progressive movement dimmed or even extinguished if Biden is in power? This is a point that Antonio brings up. I agree. Absolutely. This is the big fear. And Trump, if only by means of counterpoint, actually enlivens and energizes the opposition. In fact, I don't even think he's got full power over his own party. Now, he can do some mischievous things, such as put in a very conservative person into the Supreme Court. But I think what we should do at Americans, at least at this stage, is devote our energies towards Congress and making sure that the Republicans do not have any kind of majority in Congress, thereby preventing Trump from putting in extreme right conservative judges. So we do have some protection that way. But Dave, to vote prophylactically, I'm just not thrilled with that. How about you?
Well, what's going to happen, Paul? First of all, I got to get a thesaurus and a dictionary out there because I'm still stuck on prophylactic, but assuming that I kind of know what it is, all right?
The word of the night.
You know.
Yeah, you know what? We would get the sound bite with that.
One big.
You're an English teacher, Dave.
I was a bad one. It just because I was there didn't mean I knew it. Here's the thing. And I'd like to change the format if I can, just a little bit, Sandy, and just have some short exchanges because there's Antonio and Paul are saying some great things. So I'm going to address Paul first, come back to Antonio, and you guys can ask me questions if we can. Paul, very quickly.
Yeah.
I believe that you are conflicted, and you legitimately. That's not, And I said, would you like me to solve that for you tonight? I can.
Sure.
Just vote the way I do. You can't go wrong, even if you don't agree with that. Okay. Now, no, I think what happened.
Are you voting for Jesse Ventura?
Oh, I like the body when he was a wrestler. Now, Roddy Piper would come.
I'm leaning towards Kanye.
Okay.
Different story. Now, all right, Antonio. Here's
Back
the thing.
to channeling.
Here we go, Antonio. There's nothing I can argue with. I don't want to. What you said is all true. But here's one thing I think we're missing. I think we're all missing this. and I can be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. I always preface my remarks. I was on 13 times with Donald Trump. 11 times he made remarks, and I said he won't be in the race come tomorrow. I said he cannot win the primary, and I said he could not win the general election. So take it with a grain of salt. What a good political prophylactic. No, that's not it. Whatever that thing is. I mean, but I think the pandemic, I think we're kind of missing that. Now, when you just study history, yes, there's a pattern and that kind of thing. This pandemic is like nothing I've ever seen. Well, who cares? Because really, I mean, I'm only a piece. I don't know that I don't know if the world has ever. Well, they haven't seen this in the 21st century. All right. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. We need history to look back on it. We need Howard Zinn, by the way, who is the greatest, in my opinion. Just stop there. He should be taught in every school, and we're done. Okay. However, so I think a big question is, what has the pandemic changed? We can talk about that later. I think another big question is, somebody who first took the streets in '69. I'm not willing to say that what we did was in vain. I think there were some things to come out of it. Paul, you mentioned EPA with Nixon, and but we didn't stop a war, but it was this whole thing building. And you look at the streets today. I can't remember a time. What are we on, day 31 or whatever? It's sort of like Nightline when it first came out with the Iranian hostages. People are out in that street tonight risking their lives, saying they have a higher calling. And Sandy, I want to say the F word, but she said I can't say it, so I won't until the end of the show. But think about that. I think we underrate that sometimes. And the stupid asses who disagree with them, they're just partying out there. No, the people down in Florida who are dancing to 2-pack or 6-pack or 12-pack or whatever, they're the ones that aren't doing it. These people out in the street are real, they're genuine. And I'm going to submit to you, I have faith in them. And here's the thing. I think the reason that I just don't think Trump is even a choice, but that's my personal opinion. The reason why I think Biden is a better choice, first of all, he has the best shot of getting rid of Trump. Are things going to be a panacea? No, they're not. Two Democrats that I think would make much better presidents than Joe Biden ran this time. One is Bernie, and the other is Elizabeth Warren. I think the Democratic Party, to me, has many lights in there. That could do some good things, and I think he'll get a cabinet. Now, again, we all know that politicians say things and don't follow up on it. So I'm really not interested in what they say they're going to do, right now. Then you go back and look at his track. Joe Biden is not a progressive. We know that. However, I think that having him in, the progressives, and we could argue this, will get more listened to than they will Trump. Do you know what Donald Trump cares about? We know that. Donald Trump. And maybe once in a while, his lust for his daughter. But other than that, there's nothing going on in the man's head. Now, I also think we need to look beyond ourselves, and I think sometimes we don't. And Antonio, I'm not picking on you, but you know what? I'm 68 years old, and I think you said 26, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. And, you have a lot of things I don't, and I have a lot of things that you don't. One of the things I have is experience. Now, that doesn't make it right or wrong, or you're wrong, or, whatever. But I just feel that this time, looking back at what I know in my lifetime, and that's all I can judge and what I've read about history, and I know other people say, well, it isn't. But, there have been different times, right? America was formed in a different time. There was nothing like that. And we blew it. Okay, I got that. We blew it. I've always thought the worst thing about America is we do not live up. If you read the words, they're pretty damn beautiful. But then you got to remember they were written by slaveholders. So when they say, oh, men were created equal, they had their own idea of that. And it literally was that. And they put white and land holding and some education in there. But we've been able to kind of change that a little bit. Now, I look at the shock troops, if you will. I hate to use it, but it's a war. It's a war. It's fine. The shock troops are young. And I really think, and please, if you see it differently, please let me know. I don't think those young people are going to let Joe Biden have business as usual. I think they'll surround that damn White House just as fast as they did with Donald Trump. And while I agree that I don't think it'll move Trump. I think it'll move Trump to try to kill more people. Literally. I don't know if it'll move Biden, but Biden's got to make a commitment. I don't think the young people will allow it. The problem is and I've talked to a lot of them, they feel lost. Antonio, you and I've had this conversation. And you're right. I can't give you hope. I can't give you faith. All I can say is if it's as bad, you once said about 2030, and you can say that later. I don't think you're wrong for looking at that. I think it's scary, but you still fight. And all I can say for myself is I expect Joe Biden to be better than Trump just by breathing, but that's not enough. It can't be business as usual. And I think there's more chance. The biggest thing I think America must do is get rid of Donald Trump. Now, is that going to change? No. But what it's going to do, if you're going to take on the battle, you take out the leader, you take out the king. And look, that's amazing. And I'd love to hear anybody's understand. I do not understand how Donald Trump was able to take over the Republican Party. I don't. I'm sorry. He has no power base. He's a sham. He's a con man. He's a bad P.T. Barnum. And yet people are risking their whole career. Do you know how many legislators may go down? Do you understand what the history books? I mean, we do, but they don't. You really think Nunez from California is going to shine? Who's going to shine is AOC. Who's going to shine are the people that are saying not only no to Trump, they are the future. Antonio, you talk and you talk, and I just don't get it. I think, okay, first of all, slavery / racism / original sin, indigenous people. We put that over here. Next, I don't have any idea why we don't have some kind of health care better than we have. Again, I'm looking at that pandemic. Aunt Joe is dying. Grandma. And what I'm hoping is that finally people wake up and say, one of the greatest needs is healthcare. It has to be available to everyone. It has to be affordable. And again, I Cory Booker's from my old state, New Jersey. And here's where the practicality comes in. I don't think Cory Booker's a bad man at all. I don't. He's one of the people that I've actually talked to down here. But Cory Booker, he lives in a state where he almost has to take pharmaceutical money to run. You know, Bernie takes Bernie didn't take NRA money, but Bernie can't win if you say, I want to take every gun away from, the people in Vermont. So there's some practical sides to that. And so again, I would ask anyone, whether it's you, Tony, or whether it's you, Paul, Brian, I don't care what he does. But the question is 3. And you addressed it to Antonio, and I think you just need to revisit it. I'm not saying wrong. Are you, Antonio Reid, better off with Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or somebody else in the White House? That's 1. 2, are the people that you care most about, family, friends, community, who is the best president for them? And 3rd, I think you have to look at who is the best president for the groups that you feel are the most disenfranchised. I'll leave with my saying. I don't like people who do sayings. I despise them. I find them despicable, horrendous, but I'm going to do one. I think we need mottos to live, and here's one of mine that I've tried to do all my life. Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And to me, I don't think Donald Trump will do that. I don't think he can. And I think Joe Biden would be better at that than Donald Trump. And the practical side of me says, if I can find Jesse the Body Ventura, or if I can find, I won't be a libertarian.
All right.
That's it.
Okay.
I'm done.
Brian,
Okay.
you did, it was eloquent.
All right.
Brian, I know I see also behind those glasses some percolating and some moving and shaking.
I'm
Brian,
alone again.
I'd
Wasn't
like
that
you to
song
respond.
Alone Again Naturally?
Well, I'm glad you responded.
What a wonderful song that was.
Why do you feel that way,
All right.
Brian?
I can't agree with anybody.
What I
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I want to.
Dave, you have to keep quiet now, all right? Okay. Okay, where do I begin? Okay, first of all, let me begin where I left off about the pragmatism and idealism, and about the point that we generally have the same opinions of these people, but we land in different places. Now, first, I listened again to Antonio. He mentioned that Obama turned off the liberal class, more or less, and that's not. And Antonio, it's not just you; it's everybody that I've seen the last 2 years on the Reality Report. People in the chat rooms, basically on the far left, have said that Biden looks after the corporate interests. The Democratic Party looks after the corporate interests. And quite frankly, I don't agree with that. If the Democratic Party, as they did, initiated the Voting Rights Act, initiated Head Start, initiated flight in space to the moon, initiated Head Start, initiated the 40-hour work week, initiated the overtime. And I'll tell you what, if that is bowing down to the corporations, I'll take it any time, because I know that, that old expression, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. We can look at these corporate interests, and I'm sure there are plenty. You can go through history of this and that, but again, this is a very conservative country. I don't see it. I don't even see the liberal classes ever, not even a third party. You can go back to maybe Ross Perot got 8% of the vote, or Wallace won 4 or 5 states. I don't know exactly. And he only ran just because he might have been able to force one of the candidates to move toward him if they didn't get to the 270. So the liberal progressive wing of the United States has never been. And I'm with all of you. I consider myself a progressive. I want the same. I want the entire Arctic filled with ice. In fact, I'd like half the planet filled with ice. I'd be just fine with it. But
be cold.
I don't care. I do fine with cold weather. But I realize what this country is. And you have that absurd conservative right side of the political spectrum, and they make it so difficult. And it's the system, the electoral college system. It's essentially a binary system. Everything we talk about tonight only works if you have IRV voting. Okay, instant runoff voting, where you're second best candidate, and I can go through that some other time. But the way the system is set up right now, we're never going to get out of a binary choice. And given that binary choice, again, I'm going back, I'm going to stay steady with that pragmatism. You can pick and choose from history. You can look at Obama with the drone strikes. And by the way, I don't think Obama purposely wanted to have drone strikes to kill people. You have to get approval to have the strike. There has to be a reason. Now, whether that was appropriate or not, okay, there are going to be mistakes. We know in World War II, every war, that's going to happen. But again, you must land on the pragmatic side of the political spectrum. And the Democratic Party, for the most part, in my humble opinion, has nothing to apologize for. Every one of these things that I talked about, and there are others, banking regulations, NPR, the things we like listening to, that all came from the Democratic Party. The Republican Party has done nothing for anybody on the left. Nobody. So I get it, and I'm not even saying I'm right and you're wrong. I'm just saying my perspective is such that I'll be proud of my vote, even though I know Joe might be sleepy, Joe might be creepy, but he's not quite as creepy as that other side. And that's where I'm going to stay right now until my next comment. I won't talk as long as Dave did.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. I thought that was also eloquently stated as I was messing around with some technical things.
I'd like to point out something, Sandy.
Yes.
Great speech, Brian. I do want to point out what we might forget about, and all those achievements put in place by the Democrat Party all occurred before Ronald Reagan. You see, the Democrat Party today resembles the former Democrat Party as much as the Democrat Party of the Civil War. The Democratic Party has morphed well over to the right, and this current version has nothing to do with any of those great programs.
Well, I would say some have, like, for example, the reduced auto emissions. I mean, you can laugh at what Obama did with climate change, but he did do certain things.
And Clinton put in an FMLA act as well, but then you look at all the other damage done at the same time. But the point is, all those landmark, and there are landmark achievements, were done by the old Democrat Party, which I definitely love, and unfortunately we've lost our way. And
Well,
And let me just respond a little bit to some of the points that Brian made as well. Um, the first thing I would say is that I think it's an extreme thing to say that the Democratic Party, today's Democratic Party, doesn't have anything to apologize for. Um, at least in my view, again, I understand this is a sort of plantation that we're all on. And the difference between Trump and Joe Biden to me is the difference between a more cosmopolitan, outwardly liberal plantation master and a more bombastic one. But my vote here is to get off the plantation, not to have a nicer plantation master. And secondly, I would say, Paul is exactly right. I think Brian took the same type of shot that a lot of Republicans say when they say it was the Republican Party that freed the slaves under Lincoln. The Republican Party's not racist. But of course, we know now in the modern era that we've gone through a Southern strategy that the Republican Party and Democrat Party have flipped. We also know that even internally, the Democratic Party politics have changed from the New Deal era into the neoliberal era that roughly started at the end of the Carter administration and really exploded under the Reid administration. And of course, the Democratic Party would be finalized into neoliberalism under Bill Clinton. And to say that the Democratic Party, it's hard for me to respond because I just hope that people, they say the things they say because they just don't know. But this is a party under Bill Clinton, again, went into East Timor, said that General Suharto's our guy, killed 200,000 landless peasants without question. You know, these are things, and this is just one incident. I mean, we can talk about the things that happened in Sudan. We can talk about the things that happened in Honduras. We can, I think, well, let me say this. When you vote for someone, for whatever reason you find yourself voting for them, you're responsible for what they do in a democratic society. You're responsible for what they do. And I find it extremely offensive to say that when Obama was strategically trying to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, an American citizen, and then his son, I think to say, just simply dismiss that as accidents happen, really misunderstands what the war on terror, that project, has done to international civil law and what it's done to constitutional law here in the United States in terms of militaries engaging non-combatants. I don't really want to get into that, talking about America's jurisprudence and its implications on foreign policy and domestically, but I really don't think it's appropriate to simply dismiss that as an accident or something like that. Hundreds of children now have lost their lives, just alone, hundreds of children have lost their lives due to drone strikes under the Obama administration. And this is countless. I mean, people have died under the regime change wars under the Obama administration. I just don't think you can brush under the war those people's lives.
I don't think I have to jump to defense here a minute. I don't give a damn about rules. Never have. Not going to listen to it. Antonio, here's the thing. You brought it up. If you notice, I'm white. I don't know if everybody can see that. And Antonio, I'm going to give this. I can't be a black man as much as I want to, if I wanted to, right? But when you you use the word plantain, and I think that's true. I mean, I look at football. I think there's something there. So this is a terrible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
If you say, not you say, say it was real. Say it's a real plantation, right? A real plantation. Do you want Donald Trump as your field master or Joe Biden? That just at that moment.
But see, this is actually the question, and I'll be fair. I'm an Africana Studies major and American History major.
You also have an unfair advantage. You're black, which is kind of
and I'm also a Black American. These are actually the questions that Negroes in the antebellum period had to ask themselves.
I understand that.
But it wasn't a binary question. There's another question.
I'd like to hear that. That's what I'm saying. You're teaching. I mean, yeah, go.
There's another question, and that was what I said. I'm voting to leave the plantation.
Okay,
This vote,
I think that's brilliant. Now we'll bring it back to the real world. Okay, where does your vote go to leave that plantation?
for me,
Yeah,
personally, it goes to third party. And why? Because I want to tackle the questions that you asked me earlier. You said, and I thought this was a perfect way to ask the question, and this is the same question as I was leaving my American history classes that I would tell everybody. If you cannot identify the positive change in your life that occurs from one presidency to the next, that is a catastrophic problem. And the answer to your question is, I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't think that my life, in terms of my material well-being, in terms of my life health span, in terms of my future, I don't think it is now on a much worse trajectory than it was under Obama.
let me just make. Oh, I'm sorry, because I'm not questioning you. Because everybody's, oh, you're questioning. No, I'm not. I was dozing, not dozing, but all for a minute. So if I hear you correctly, when you look at you're saying it's not that much worse with Donald Trump. We're just speaking to you personally than it was with Obama. Is that a fair assessment?
And not only is that important to say, the reason why I bring up the little factoids about 2.3 million undocumented immigrants is because so much harm is happening in the dark. That's kind of, I guess, the skill set of the Democrat Party is that it's able to do these things in the cloak of night.
And Tony, that means you care about immigrants and people that aren't Americans. What is wrong with you? Okay, why would anybody in their right mind even entertain? We're exceptional. You look. You probably won't even join me right now if I start screaming USA, would you commie pinko weirdo?
Now, but to me, I really do ask the question, and I get really upset. And if you see some of my Facebook posts, I called South Carolina when they voted for Joe Biden. I said, well, the former slave state voted with a slave mentality that when you're on the plantation, it does become so hopeless. The idea when you're living on a plantation, the idea of freedom is so bleak that that people lose the even consciousness of freedom. And the whole question then does become this slave mentality, Joe Biden or Trump. And I think that the people who still have the freedom, the will to power in Nietzschean terms, should really speak out and say that we don't have to commit this suicide. And just because one of them is a slightly more pleasant suicide than the other, this is completely nonsensical. We shouldn't be engaged in this foolery. What we should be doing is actually fighting for those ideals that would make us a better society instead of kind of pushing off our democratic responsibility to this idea of two lessers of two evils. But let me tell you, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, all these people, Trayvon Martin, these people were killed under the Obama presidency. So if you're asking me the question, did I fear for my brother's life under the Obama administration more than the Trump administration? I feel like I fear for them just the same.
Okay, that's
I don't think
very fair.
that life. Talk to the people in Chicago who are being gentrified right now because of the Obama library. So I really do want to answer the question: are people's lives better off now, or are they worse off than they were under 2008? Under 2013? And I see all the crisis we faced then, we're still in, and the trajectory is still getting worse unabated.
And Antonio, I can't argue with that. I just want to point this out. Something else to consider, though, too, is the fact, would you agree, and Paul and Brian, everybody, that, there's some good things in the Constitution, some bad things. The Bill of Rights, to me, you could just run the country with the First Amendment done properly. We'd be in pretty good shape. Another threat that we haven't addressed tonight is I think that between, and we haven't named a third party candidate except jokingly Jesse Ventura. And to be honest with you, that's the only name I've really heard that's got any kind of interest in it. If he wears that boa that he wore, that's pretty cool. But the idea of it is also, who protects the Constitution? Or do we just let that fall? I mean, there's only two possibilities with Donald Trump, as far as I'm concerned. He either can't read it and understand it, or he understands it and ignores it. There is no boundary to what Donald Trump will do. I don't see that now. So to me, I'm not saying, Antonio, for you to vote for him. I wish what you would get is a bigger platform, because I think what you articulate, you speak for a lot of people, but that voice isn't heard. You know why? Because you don't have no MONEY. That's why. I mean, that doesn't make it right. So how does
Neither
that?
do I.
Yeah,
Wish
I
I
know.
could help him.
Well, no,
I wish I could help him.
you were
If I
following.
could, I would.
Sandy's loaded.
You were following the Grateful Dead for all those years, Sandy. That was.
No.
Well, I was out
You
with the
know,
Rolling Stones
guys,
making money.
Can I interject here? Now we've really laid out the passions of each of us or each of you, and I am interested in maybe for the rest talking about how do we get to those ideals we seek? How do you get there? And actually, I'd like to start with Brian. How do you get there, Brian, if we need to be where we clearly are not and getting rid of the neoliberalism that has infected this country?
How do we get there? Geez, I thought I was hoping I could finish. By the way, when I did roll off all those points about what the Democratic Party did, there were some things that I could have spouted out that were recent. And, I mean, Dave knows that our high school breakfast program just 2 or 3 years ago was instituted. So there are a lot of things, and let's not forget that the Republican Party tried to shoot down everything that Obama did, including Obamacare. So I just want to say, I hope I can clarify that I wasn't just trying to state that the Democratic Party stopped in 1968 and said, forget about it. No, I disagree. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that when I stated all those things, in no way did I want anybody to think that I forgot about Dodd-Frank and all the other things. Now, that being said, Sandy, and thank you for letting me take a second to defend myself there for a second. Where do we go from here? I think that's what you're saying, because what we have is again what I keep saying. Right now, essentially, there's only 2 people who can win, possibly win. There's only one person. There's only 2 people who can possibly win. Okay, Dave said this many times before.
Right.
And I understand. I said this to one of my former students just 2 days ago on Divided We Stand, Jen Albertson. He's exactly like Antonio as far as his opinion. He does not respect the Democratic Party at all, especially what they did to Bernie Sanders. He asked me why I was voting for Biden, and I went to my whole spiel about pragmatism and this and that. Not the same facts, but generally the same thing.
Yeah.
But we're in a hell of a problem here, because you really have asked the correct question. How do we get here? But again, that thing called perspective here, it's like me saying this is right and this is left. But if I'm turned around, it might be left or right to you, or it's right and left to me. And that perspective, where we get to. You ask a Republican, that's a much different place. You ask a centrist Democrat, that's a much different place. You ask a progressive. We all know that we need that Arctic to freeze. We all know that there's a bunch of crap going on in Russia with Putin. We all know what Trump's doing. But I think the danger now is, and this is not really any of us here, it's just the idea, as I said, the center has dropped out. And that's a dangerous place to be, because even though the progressive left is not with the Democratic Party, you've got a very strong force on the right, and you've got a fairly strong force on the left, which can kind of get together, as we've seen with BLM. But this can create such a dangerous atmosphere, a caustic atmosphere, and already it's like that. And the Republicans haven't taken out their guns yet. We have a mutual friend, Gary Peacock, mentioned he was just at a store the other day, and one of these right-wing Trumpers said he's ready to fight the Civil War. And this is what bothers me, because at this point in time, you feel like you should only be negotiating with yourself. Like, that's it. Do I vote for Biden or not? You shouldn't have to do a 3-way negotiation, but apparently we're doing that. And as I see it, I don't know how do we get to the answer of your question, because we can't agree. We can't even agree tonight. I can't agree with anybody tonight. I mean, surely Dave and I are fairly close.
You quit linking the two of us.
Well, Paul, thanks.
Well, I did it for you.
But I look, and I mean this with all respect to Antonio and Paul and Dave. I'm just different. I am where I am, and nobody's convinced me otherwise yet. And I know it's not a popular view.
Paranoid tonight.
Pardon me?
You're not different. You're not.
No, I
different.
am. I am. I mentioned to you
surrounded with.
today about cutting to the chase. We were talking, had a private conversation. I am just, I cannot. Nobody's given me any information that's going to poke me and change me, and I don't think anybody on the other side has. And that's what scares me. Because a lot of people are idealistic, and what happens if he wins? Then we lose everything. But like you say, many people believe that Biden is toxic, and I could be wrong, but I don't know how you get there, Sandy. I really don't. If I had an answer, I'd give it to you. I'm very, very pessimistic, but I think it's a great question. But I don't see centrist Democrats aligning themselves with progressives in any real way, and I certainly don't see the right ever thinking about climate change or this or that. That's just my 2 cents.
So it's like a predicament, like.
Yeah, it's like in Mendham used to say, like, there's no win in this life game, and people always wonder why I'm a big fan of Gary's, because he's actually right. There's Gary himself has said, don't ever vote third party. You have to work within the system, but they're all schmucks and blah blah blah. I mean, he's already said that, but he's already said life in itself. You're just going nowhere, and I think he's right. I think that. And it's really not listen, if you're a young kid watching this show, this is the worst thing to watch when I say something like this. Sure. But I think he's right. And I think that we're going nowhere. We're going nowhere.
It's a tough one because we are, the influences are so different than 20, 30 years ago on culture. Paul, I'm interested in what your thoughts are on getting there and what is there to you.
Well, I think that we'll have to see as the debates hit whether Biden starts adopting a more progressive policy. I kind of doubt he will. This is the man who doesn't want Medicare for all, but wants to extend it to 60, people 60 or above. But he always qualifies everything. He says those who are 60, between the ages of 60 and 65, can keep their corporate-sponsored private insurance if they so choose. And, of course, Medicare pays hospitals less than private health insurance. So, I mean, you're just winnowing it all the effect of the whole push movement towards making Medicare for all. If you had one system, then of course you could really have an influence in pricing. Now, if you, as long as you stubbornly maintain the existence of a private insurance, which he does, then this neither fish nor fowl approach, which really the Obamacare proved to be neither fish nor fowl. It was some kind of unnatural concoction that didn't satisfy either wing, either the conservatives or the progressive. So to answer your question, and that's just on healthcare, on Social Security, he dilly-dallies around on that too, agreeing to increase the payroll tax on those making $400,000 over, but also increasing the retirement age so that we Americans, we can work right till the end and maybe have 2 years of retirement, maybe. So the thing is, unless he absolutely changes his spots, and I doubt we're going to see that, I think the best way is to do as we're doing. We have to continue with the outside protests because that's the only way Americans will listen. But as far as promoting any real progressive agenda, I doubt very much Biden's going to adopt any. Now, I will say that I will wait to see, as the debates near, whether he changes anything. But again, he has no real history of this.
Okay. Well, we are getting towards it's an hour, would have been an hour and a half, a little over that.
I'm
So
just getting worn up.
okay, well,
I'm out.
Dave, what I was going to do with you, I was actually going to give everybody the floor for last comment, but I don't. I think we're a little lopsided in this. Dave, did you have anything to bring to this about? Well, what do we do? Where do we go?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. We're never going to get there. Okay? Because there is the ideal. So what do? We do what we can as best we can. Now, I'm not the type of person to judge, but I will judge Donald Trump tonight, if you don't mind.
I don't
You
mind.
don't-
I judge him all the time.
You don't go where Donald Trump goes, okay? You don't go where the Republican Party goes. If you're Antonio, you don't go where the Democratic Party goes, okay? I don't believe in parties either. I do it very simply, liberal, conservative. For me, I'm always going to vote for the more liberal candidate because it's the better at that moment on the journey. I think it's, I want to be real simplistic. We're born, we live, and we die, right? But that's really what happens. So it's what we do in that. We're not going to get there necessarily. And we could talk about, Martin Luther King, I've looked over and seen them, but he was right. We're not going to get there. We just do have our part to get us closer. And I think tonight what I heard is 4 people with a very good moderator who stayed out of it. I couldn't have done that. I would have smacked Brian 12 or 13 times. But the idea of it, very different, but not that different. And you know what it is, guys? I'm going to do the closest thing I do to Kumbaya singing. Here we go. I don't really think we differ that much on the end, but none of us are going to see it necessarily. So what we have to do is, respect is an overused term. I don't respect Donald Trump. So I don't respect everybody, but I do respect people who kind of are on the journey with me. Not that I'm on the right journey, because mine might take a right and yours takes a left. So it's just moving it forward. And I think we need to be able to look at that. And I'm going to put my faith tonight. I'm going to put my faith in 2. One of us is here. That would be Antonio, not because I think unfortunately, whenever you disagree with me, you're wrong, but that's okay. That's fine. And so Brian, Paul just rubs his head and says, he's talking again. But here's the thing. Sandy, Paul, Brian, and I, we're of a certain age group, right? Our dreams not materialize.
No.
But I certainly want them. My son today, shout out, turned 47. It will not materialize in his time. And he's raising 2 radical children. And we raised him to be somewhat radical. And he's made his wife radical, which is a major change. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, my thing now is I want to make life a little bit better for Audrey and Owen. That's my grandchildren. And while nobody may agree with me, and that's 100% fine, I think that the best I can do is get Donald Trump out of office. And the safest way I can do that is vote for Joe Biden. And Antonio, I'd like to extend, we have a very small place here. I would never invite, Brian has not been here but once. We never invited him. But Antonio, anytime, if we get Biden, and you don't like what he's doing, call me up. You can put you up here. You and I've been out there alone. We'll go out and scream, you fake Joe, you whatever. Because you young people have to devise the world as you want it, and you can't let us old fucks. I just said old fucks. I said twice. I'm sorry. I'm getting away. So Antonio,
He couldn't help himself.
I'm correcting it to you. It's bullshit. It sounds like, but it's true. You, the youth, the young people, the future, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Occupy. Damn it, change this place. That's all.
Thank you, Dave. Well, Tony, did you get to answer that question, actually?
No, he agrees with me now. You can just move on.
I'll be really quick on this so we can get to our finishing. But the perspective I want to kind of impart on people as we close is that it's never, ever been about, and I think that's why so many people who were a part of the Bernie movement latched on to not me but us, is it's never been about any single individual that's going to bring change. actually, the individuals we put forth, their agencies to try to create obstacles to change. The power and the instrument of change is with the people. Now, I will say, so the only way in terms of political strife we get there is, to turn a phrase, the times have found us. That there just has to be a certain level of upheaval, discomfort, distress, and yearning to express that in order for transformational change to come in the absence of an organized, effective leadership. So that, again, to respond to this question, the vote, voting for Biden or Trump actually doesn't even respond to this issue, right? Because this is kind of apart from that. And almost taking this approach, you can see that it actually doesn't matter who is in the presidency, just according to the circumstance. So you could have a vicious Republican like Nixon, which I think is a prototype of Donald Trump, and still get important, incredible things passed like an EPA because of the circumstance, because of the public mobilization, not because of Nixon, right? And what's important is, I think, for people as we navigate through this is kind of what Brian said. We're not going to go anywhere. But he says that very confidently after telling us who he's going to vote for. He's voting to, and people who will be making this vote, many of my family and friends, are voting to go nowhere. They are voting, like I said, to stay on the plantation. And so we know that that's not going to be an effective way to get off the plantation. Of course, voting to stay on the plantation is not an effective way to get off.
Well, that was pretty heavy. It was, because all of us have a look on our face. We've taken in a lot tonight. We sure have. Wow, deep breath.
And I want to clarify,
Yes.
It's nothing against, Brian in particular. Like I said, as a democratic society, we're a single entity. And we are under distress. And like I say, it's a suicide. It's extremely distressful. And people who are, I think, more me and Paul's box, who are so disgusted by the system, we kind of have to get drug along with whatever decision the majority goes with, whatever suicide they decide is more appropriate for their taste or for their preferences. And even they are admitting, even at least on the left, admitting that, yeah, voting for Biden is actually going to keep things as bad as they are, maybe make them worse too.
And if I may close out my side, I'd like to say, look, last election I voted prophylactically, and look what good it did me.
Jesus, God, would you use
I
words?
voted for Hillary Clinton, and I'm damned if I'm going to vote in such a negative way this time. I want to vote in a positive way. I'm not voting prophylactically. I'd rather not anyway. So
Do you have,
I guess that's...
you have money in the Trojan company or something I'm missing?
I think everybody's done really well articulating their point of view. I think every point of view I feel here has been from a very educated position, a very educated, a lot of pedagogy here, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
What's that?
I'm using the big word.
We
Figure it out. You're a pedagogical
Guys,
peddler.
stop it.
You're a pedagogical peddler.
We didn't really get a final speech out of Dave or Brian, did we?
No, I haven't gone around to get the closing comments.
That prophylactic didn't help you with
Dave
that.
spent his on prophylaxis, so it's Brian.
All right, I'm going to give each one of you like 5 minutes.
That's too much.
Whoever needs
Well,
3 minutes.
I'm going to make this very quick. First of all, I think the only thing I want to say is thank you, Sandy. I mean, I know it's difficult to sit back. I'm sure you have had opinions that you wanted to express, and
Oh,
you've
I've
been nice
told
enough to be a
everyone.
moderator. Cuts my work down tonight a lot. So I just want to say I appreciate you doing this. It's very kind of you to share this with all of your channels.
Enjoyed it.
We're a very small channel, and I've said all I needed to say, and I just appreciate what you've done. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. It was great. I didn't do much. I just wanted to hear the positioning.
No, you
and
did.
bring it out
You
to
did. You know
everybody.
why? I know that you've done a lot. You've been able to keep Dave down to a minimum. Okay? You're the
Yeah, you
first
think
Well,
person.
then I think I should be
you
proud
5
of
because I'm
myself.
taking your 4 and my 5.
Because he's going to start calling me up at 10 o'clock tonight. He won't get off the phone till 1.
Because I'm the most interesting
Well,
person
Dave,
I know to hear myself.
I felt pretty much, Dave, that you did sort of a closing. Let's give you just a couple of minutes because really, it
Simply,
is getting long.
I want to address Antonio directly. And the reason I'm addressing Antonio directly is you're it. I'm going to insult you. When I say kids, you're it. We're leaving soon. I don't necessarily want to leave, right? And some of us, and it's not about, oh yeah, you tried so hard. Some of us did. And look where we are, okay? I had much more optimism in 1968 than I do today. The only thing that, it didn't trouble me what you said, but I understand that frustration. You're not going to get your way this time. And that's not what you want. I understand that. But what you have to do is figure out how you will get that to be the way that people are going. And I feel that there's a constituency out there for Antonio, president in 38. No, not that. But the idea of it is there's young people today that have just said and acting and showing it. This is fucked. There's no other word. That's a proper use of it. And it's time. And I think, unfortunately, Joe Biden is old. And that doesn't send a good message to people that are young. And Joe Biden has a history. I'll tell you what I'm going to be very interested in, and we didn't address it tonight. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. If he's dead, I'm still voting for Joe Biden if Donald Trump is running. Okay, I don't care. But I will be very interested in his pick for vice president. And he's bottled himself in a little bit. I'm not bad with that, though. It's time for a woman. Tonight, if they say you're going to vote for president, I'm voting for Sandy, Amy, Sandy, whatever the hell your name is.
Sandra, Amy, Cash and Cochran.
Because you're a woman. My second vote would be for Brian because nobody's really sure what he is. But Paul, I'm not voting for you. I'm not voting for myself. But seriously, I think that's something. It's not going to change your vote, Tony, nor should it. I hope you find your third party candidate. I hope all young people find him. And I hope someday that third party is the leading party if it's the right party.
Yeah. Well, that was short and sweet. I think this has been great. Paul, Brian, Dave, Antonio. I think what we can do, and I've been using that I think a lot tonight, we could do this again. We could do this when the vice president pick comes up.
Oh, that would be fascinating.
And I would be more than happy to do what I've just done, which is just sit and facilitate a bit. Does anybody have anything pressing before we bid adieu and we say thank you very much to the audience?
And I think that was it. And we didn't tonight, and it's not an apology. We didn't take questions. And I think sometimes we always do. Tonight, we that shit again, Brian. So
I think it's the cut sign.
Get you Brian's phone number. He loves to get questions at 4:30 a.m. Yes.
All right. Well, listen, Brian, I'm going to let you have it. It's your channel, Divided We Stand. Make sure you sub the channel and come here because they have some really excellent discussions. And you guys out there, follow me, follow Brian, follow. It's about listening to perspectives other than the tiny little corner a lot of times we paint ourselves into. And that's what happened here. We've all been listening to perspectives that we have I guess, taken ourselves out of the box a little. And I thought it was great and very helpful for me in making my decisions. So thank you guys. Thank you, everyone. Darlene, CB, Troy, Nicholas, Jean, Kim, CB, everybody. I'm a sweet leaf. And take it away, Brian.
Right. Just
Thanks.
again, thank you, Sandy. I think you've said that all. And please subscribe. We don't monetize. We just ask that you subscribe. Give us a thumb up or a thumb down. Doesn't matter. Just as long as it goes in some direction, we're happy that we have some interactivity. If you are interested in the channel, please watch us on Tuesday nights, 8 o'clock. This is a political channel. If you're bored with politics, this really isn't the thing for you. But we're on, again.
Yeah, but then I'm on after at 9.
And you're on after, right? So you get, you get empowered.
On tonight?
Pardon me?
No, I'm not on tonight.
No.
No.
Okay.
This was my night.
So, look, Dave and I do care about the environment, and I especially care about the environment, but I'm going to leave that up to Sandy because that's really her forte and not mine, and I think it's a great thing. So you could start it with Divided We Stand, end it with Environmental Coffee House, and thank you. All right, so I think we have a show tonight. It's done.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, my good friend Paul Maginley from Toledo, Ohio. Antonio, it's wonderful talking with you. I know sometimes we're on the opposite side, but you're wonderful, and it's very relaxing being able to discuss this with you. Honestly,
Everybody's wonderful.
It sure is.
Dave. Now I know you're the biggest fan of Antonio now, so watch out, Antonio. He'll never stop calling your name. He'll be pandering to you the whole time. So,
Unlike some people I could talk.
Brian, I just want you to know I knew this would happen.
Okay.
I just knew it.
hey, can I at least tell the audience what I told all four of you prior to going on?
No, not that
Yeah.
secret.
No, I've got to, Dave.
It's okay.
David Price taught for 34 years in the Bridgeton School District. He was asked to make a speech in front of all of the staff at his retirement. So at the end of the day, we all entered into the auditorium to hear Mr. Price speak. And boy, did he, for 15 minutes. The only thing is he said nothing about the retirement. Guess what he talked about? I'll leave you with that, folks. You don't want to know.
No.